Okay, definitely a lot happened in these two sections at the end of this book. Um, I don't know how to structure this because, well, as I said, so much happened. This is a Sanderson climax at its most Sanderson-y, as it were. Um, so I guess I'm gonna start talking about the character stuff because the character stuff was very interesting here. There were several moments here that I really enjoyed. I really liked the reveal of Aldrianne as actually kind of the mastermind behind a lot of what happened with her, rather than a hapless victim. I did like that. I liked that she became a fully developed character. Um, we finally have uh, multiple women in a Sanderson book, which is nice. Um, Although just as that happens, of course, Tindwyl dies. So we're back down to two women. Pardon. Uh, but I do enjoy Aldrianne as a character, and I hope we'll see more of her in the next book. Which we probably will because Breeze is still around. Um, Breeze in general, just his arc in this book has been really good. I did not expect Breeze to be a character who got a ton of development, compared to some of the other members of the crew. But he actually is. He's probably the most developed member of Kelthier's original crew at this point. Um, and I like it. I like the sort of it's an interesting character. Like he's sort of the thief with the heart of gold, but with a twist. The twist being that he doesn't really think of himself as a good person, and also really doesn't want anyone else to think of him that way. He's actually got a ton of weird internalized self-loathing stuff going on, which is interesting. Um, and I'm glad that he made it through this, which not everyone did. We did lose some characters here. We lost. Let me just see here. I made notes of everyone who died. We lost Tindwyl, of course. We lost Clubs, and we lost Doxson. I'm not particularly upset about any of those. um, but well, I'm upset about Tindwyl. I'm not upset about Doxson or Clubs. Tindwyl's death felt unnecessarily tragic, I guess. Since Sazed had just found her. I'm not saying it was a bad choice. I'm sure it will inform Sazed's character arc going forward into the next book. I kind of just felt like there was more to that character than we ever got. But that I could just be projecting onto her something that wasn't actually there. Now Doxson. Doxson frustrates me as a character because the book really wants us to think that his prejudice against the nobility is bad and wrong, which it isn't. It's constantly shown as oh, he's just prejudiced. It's unreasonable to hate all the nobility. He says, oh, maybe we should have killed all the nobles after the revolution. And then he's like, oh, but then we'd be just like them. And no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Because you wouldn't be killing them for hatred or revenge. You'd be doing it because they are actively fighting against you. They're opposed to your new world. If the nobility had been properly dealt with, maybe not through murder, but at least through taking away all of their institutional power after the collapse, none of the plot of this book would have happened. Literally everything that happened in this book, all the chaos and bloodshed, is because three noblemen, Straff, Set, and Lekal, were allowed to stick around and keep their power. So I do wish the book would reckon more with how the inherent class position of noblemen is the problem. It's not just a symptom, it is the thing that needs to change. And I don't feel like the book gets that, because at the end of the book, Elend is made emperor, and that's treated as a good thing, which bothers me. I feel like this book's arc was like Elend learning that democracy doesn't work and that authoritarian monarchy is good, actually. There's still another book. It's possible that that message will turn back around, but right now it's kind of rubbing me the wrong way. And since I'm talking about stuff that I'm sort of politically uncomfortable with this final section of this book, I guess I'll also add, I'm very uncomfortable with the portrayal of the Koloss in this book so far. I'm never a big fan of the whole, like, brutish, evil, violent race trope. Well, it feels kind of racist, frankly. And the same is true here. It's just weird having this entire species of sapient people who are clearly capable of human levels of thought and reasoning being portrayed as just cannon fodder, as just these horrifying evil monsters that must be stopped or mind controlled against their consent. And none of this is ever treated as morally questionable in any way. I just don't like it. It's possible that the third book will maybe see some humanization for the Koloth. That would be really nice. I'm not really holding my breath for it, though, because it is kind of a well-trodden fantasy trope, and so far it feels like it's being played pretty straight. The only thing that gives me hope is that one bit where the Koloth basically said, "We are not Koloths, we are people, and we want Luthadel because we want a city of our own." I'm hoping that that gets developed and that we see more of that sort of drive for a normal, like, civilized existence from the Koloths, and that they aren't left as these, like, brutish, violent, primitive creatures who can only be controlled or slaughtered. Because if they are, it's just kind of weird and morally unpleasant to me. I think that's about it for the political side, though. The political side of this finale, I have lots of trouble with. But as much as I don't like the political side of this finale, everything else about it was fantastic. So, really, while these are parts 5 and 6 of the book, and they do take place in that order, they are really two endings, because this book kind of had two plots. It had the political plot with Strath and Set and the Koloss, and then it had the supernatural plot with Vin and the Well of Ascension and Sazed and the Hero of Ages. And Vin was sort of the character who... the only real link between the two plots was Vin, because her character development as a result of one plot directly influenced her actions in the other, and vice versa. And that's an interesting structure for a book like this to have. And the book, as a result, kind of has two endings, where part 5 is the ending and climax of the Strath-Set Koloss plot, and then part 6 is the ending and climax of the Well of Ascension Hero of Ages plot. And both were really well handled. I will say, the ending of the Koloss thing was extremely anime. Vin flying through the air, in a storm of horseshoes, wielding a massive sword that's like larger than herself, like Guts from Berserk, and flying through the air and landing directly on Straff to split him in half with the sword was the most anime shit I've ever read, and I loved it. I have no problems with that. I love that Sanderson is clearly willing to go very over the top with some of the action scenes sometimes, and I enjoy that, actually. Speaking of Straff, I also really enjoyed the reveal that his lover slash alchemist was actually poisoning him the whole time. I was a bit disappointed that it kind of didn't pay off, because he just survived and then immediately got killed by Vin in an unrelated way. I think it kind of might have been nicer if he'd actually died of that. But it was a nice bit of, like, villainous character development for him, which I enjoyed. Now, Vin uniting everyone and Sazed thinking that she's the hero of ages was interesting, especially in light of what happens at the end of the book. So let's go to the big actual climax of the story, because I semi-called this. So I predicted that either Zane was going to be the hero of ages, or it was going to turn out that the hero of ages isn't actually a thing. And the second thing happened. It turns out it's not really a thing. The prophecy was fake. It was created by this entity in the well. And sort of artificially spread through the Terrace people. And my current theory, which might still be based on nothing because it was just one throwaway line earlier in the book, but my current theory is that the entity in the well is preservation. And that there is a second entity called Ruin somewhere out there. And that the next book is going to be about these two entities and their conflict. I could be wrong. It's possible that the one in the well is Ruin. Currently, I'm thinking not, because the one in the well is the one who created the mists, and the Khandra are beings of mist who say that they are of preservation, whereas humans are of ruin. So I'm interested in seeing where that goes, but I do currently think that what Vin just freed was preservation. And as for the actual way that she freed it, I think that was a really cool choice. I really enjoyed the idea of having the hero have this sort of, like, difficult moral decision to make at the end of the book, where they have to, like, sacrifice their loved ones for the greater good. And unlike every other story, the hero actually makes the right decision, or at least the one that we as the readers sort of expect. Like, during that whole scene, the obvious fear that we as readers have, because of where Vin's arc has been going this book, is that she is going to take the power for herself to save Elend, and then she's going to become a villain in the next book that has to be defeated, because she's going to become the next Lord Ruler. And then she doesn't do that. She gives up the power. And it turns out that that was actually the wrong choice. And that's a really, really cool plot twist. That taking the power for herself was actually the better choice to make. I really enjoyed that. Now, that being said, I'm not entirely sold on the whole there is no hero of ages thing yet, in part because, well, in the next book is called The Hero of Ages, which makes me think that we are still going to be dealing with some version of the Hero of Ages narrative. Maybe it'll turn out that there was actually an original true prophecy that got corrupted over time by the entity in the well. and that there is actually a true prophecy, maybe one that has to do with the other entity. So if this is ruin, then the other one would be preservation, and if this is preservation, then the other one would be ruin, whichever one it is. And if there is a real Hero of Ages prophecy, so to speak, my guess is that it's gonna be Elend and not Vin, especially now that he's also a MISTBORN. And the reason I would guess that is because when Sazed was sort of mentally reciting all the things that make the Hero of Ages and looking at Vin, I kept thinking, yeah, but everything he's saying kind of also applies to Elend. Maybe better than to Vin. So I'm definitely guessing that, and the other reason why I'm guessing that it's Elend and not Vin is because Elend had that weird encounter with the Mist Spirit, where the Mist Spirit pointed him north towards Terrace. My guess would be that the other entity, the one that is meant to counteract this entity, is somewhere in Terrace, and that's where they're gonna go next book. Which is going to be difficult because Terrace is gone. Terrace has been taken by the Inquisitors, which, holy crap, that was a shock because I completely forgot about the Inquisitors. I forgot they were a thing. I guess they're gonna be the final bad guys of the series. They're gonna be the big bads of the third book because they're clearly working for whatever's in the well. At least Marsh is, and the way that Marsh acts and some of the vibes I'm getting from Marsh and company is that they are really, really, really similar to something from N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy. And in general, this book is like, this series has some weird resonance with that trilogy, actually, because that trilogy also takes place in a world which is largely covered in volcanic ash and is sort of in a post-apocalyptic state. And it also has something really, really similar to the Inquisitors in it. So, I'm definitely curious to know if N.K. Jemisin has read the MISTBORN trilogy and was somewhat inspired by it. I do still maintain personally that the Broken Earth trilogy is better because it's like my favorite, one of my favorite book series of all time. But it would be interesting to know if it was kind of inspired by this because there's, like I said, there's some similarities there. And I guess that's actually something I want to talk about this book as a whole, which is that this book, the Broken Earth talk reminded me of this. This book kind of walks back some of the radical politics of the first book, because the first book ended with the assertion that essentially against the tyrannical government, you should rise up and violently overthrow it. Like violence is justified, and in resistance to power and oppression, and that's a pretty good message. That's true. But then this book kind of goes in a weird direction where it then kind of continues the use of violence to maintain power. It essentially seems to suggest that you need violence to change the world sometimes, from a bleak, oppressive world to a more just one. But then you also need violence and authority to, like, keep that just world. And I don't quite like that. It's very authoritarian, and I'm not a big fan of that message. I feel like the world that you create, even if you have to use violence to create it, if it needs further violence to maintain it, then it may not have been a world worth creating. It's not the best message about post-revolutionary tactics, I guess. It's possible that will change by the end of the third book, of course. It's possible that it'll turn out that the message is something else entirely. But as of right now, it feels like that's the vibe I'm getting from this. So I'm curious to see whether they're able to keep this better world they've built while also keeping some of their ethical values intact. Not Ellen's ethical values. Ellen's whole not lying thing is stupid, but not being an authoritarian dictator would be pretty nice. And right now he's kind of become one. Like he's an absolute ruler. He's the emperor, and I don't like that. I preferred him as a constitutional monarch at least. And the reason this makes me think of the Broken Earth trilogy is because the Broken Earth trilogy is kind of the opposite of that. The Broken Earth trilogy is a book that very much seems to focus on anarcho-socialist solutions after the fall of the old world. Like the oppressive, like that book begins with the end of a horrible oppressive world, and then the rest of the trilogy is sort of people rebuilding the world and trying to survive while not relying on authoritarian tyrannical tendencies. There are no emperors after the collapse. So that's definitely something that I feel like this book kind of gets wrong. So yeah, in conclusion, at the end of this book, I feel like the character arcs and the main plot of this book is fantastic, maybe even better than the first book, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But the political side of things in this book is a bit more iffy than in the first book. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the political messaging of this book. But that's fine. That's fine. Overall, I would say that I can't really say whether this book I like better than the first one or worse. I would say it's probably about the same on average, because I like the plot and characters more, but some of the themes a bit less. So on average, I would say it's probably about the same, which is pretty great for a sequel. Sequels, especially middle books. Middle books tend to be the weakest in a trilogy, as a rule. So I'm hoping that the third book is even better than the first. Yeah, do I have anything else to say about this? Yeah, I have actually a couple of things to say. A couple of details I noticed before I wrap this up. That was sort of my review of the book, I guess, but a couple of details I noticed. One, there are some... Vin mentions finding strange metal nails taken from the bodies of the Koloss, which makes me think that the Koloss are, like, kind of Inquisitors, in a way? Like, somehow related to Inquisitors. And Zane was as well, which makes me think that the voice of God that Zane was hearing is probably the same thing that's in the well, because clearly that thing acts through the Inquisitors, which means that it has some power over those spikes that are in the Inquisitors' bodies. That's the one thing I wanted to say, and the other that occurred to me is I've been sort of comparing these books less and less to Wheel of Time as time went on, as I've sort of become more and more adjusted to Sanderson's own writing style and feel less of a need to compare him to Jordan. But the end of the Straff/Set plot, where where Vin like makes all of them bow down to her in swear fealty, really, really, really gave me Dumais Wells vibes. If you've read The Wheel of Time, like I felt like that scene was pretty heavily influenced by the end of Lord of Chaos. Just a fun little thing I noticed. I don't think that's bad. Uh, just interesting, I suppose. Okay, yeah. I'm probably gonna take a little bit of a break and read something else now. Um, and then I'm going to get to the Hero of Ages. Bye.